Hello, and welcome to another episode of Coach.Better from Maduro Learning. My name is Clint Hamada.
And my name is Kim Capino, and we'll be your hosts for today's episode. This week, we're chatting with Rebekah Madrid, middle school principal at Yokohama International School in Japan. Rebekah shares her perspective about coaching as a school leader, along with insights about making coaching work in a mid-sized school, as well as some very specific, strategic, and smart ways for coaches to make themselves invaluable to any organization. Rebekah, Clint, and I all worked together at YIS for several years, so this was a fantastic opportunity to get an inside look at how the school has developed in terms of coaching over the past few years. All right, Rebekah, can you tell us a little bit about your professional experience, where you're coming from, what you're doing now?
Hi, I'm Rebekah Madrid. I'm at Yokohama International School in Japan. I'm the middle school principal and the MYP coordinator here. I've had lots and lots of different roles. I've done in-school professional learning, I've been team leader, and of course, teacher. And that pretty much sums up my professional career.
And the best part of that is that all three of us have worked together at Yokohama International School.
So all spent some quality time in Yokers.
Yes.
Oh, the good old days.
This is like the dream team. I want to get us together again.
Yes.
All right, so we'll get started. And Rebekah, you got, I'll just say it, sucked into working very closely with both of us when we were at YIS as coaches.
Joy and privilege.
So you have a very in-depth understanding of all of this stuff, which is awesome. But do not feel hesitation to, really just tell us like it is. Tell it like it is. But we'll start with the first question is, in your perspective as a leader and your experience, what do you think coaches do? What's their role in a school?
I think coaches it can really depend, but I think coaches are often there to be an outside eye, to be a critical friend, to be someone who pushes people, to be someone who can be a cheerleader. I think that role of coach can change. And one of the challenges of that is trying to figure out, what does each person need? Do they need a cheerleader? Do they need a coach? Do they need someone to push them? And it can change day to day. It can change month to month. It can change as the years progress and change over time. But the role is really varied. And it can depend on what the teachers need. And the teachers will know what the kids need.
I think that is such a great description. And it's not in our list of questions to ask you today, but it does make me curious, because you've worked with coaches as a leader and as a teacher. How valuable do you feel that role is in a school? Do you feel like it's something like every school must have, or do you feel like it's a stage that schools go through? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot without preparing you.
That's good. I think it can depend. We've gone through variations of different coaches in our ed tech department, in our learning support, in our EAL. I think it does change over time what a school needs. As a school develops its strategic plan, as a school develops what's important, where the resources are will change over time. Having someone in the role of coach is incredibly important. It's trying to figure out, how do we use their time in the most powerful way to have an impact on student learning. Because we don't have, unfortunately, never-ending resources. Like, we would love to have one-on-one coaching, or like one coach for every team, or one coach for every grade. But each school has to figure out what's going to have impact on student learning. Where is this person where do we need to see the change perhaps the most? Coaches can act as change agents. But it's often the leader's job to figure out, where do we want change? And then the coach's job to figure out, how do we get teachers on board with that change? It's a tricky role sometimes. And we know it as administrators, and we try really hard to help as best we can, but it can be a tricky role.
You just mentioned kind of that link between the coach and the administrator, and I see the administrator really as the instructional leader of the division or of the school. In your role as an administrator, or in your role as a teacher and working with other administrators, how is it different, or what are the parallels and the differences between, you're talking about being change agents, critical friends, cheerleaders, those sorts of things for your teachers. Do you do that as an administrator, and why is it different when it coach does that rather than the admin team itself?
I think the term administrator is an interesting one. Like if you are a learning leader in the school, rather than just someone administrating, as opposed to someone just checking boxes and making sure that people are where they're supposed to be, hopefully the principal or the senior leadership team or whatever you call it at your school, that they have the potential to work as a coach. I find my job is actually to act as a coach for the coaches. That's often my role as a learning leader, is to act as a coach for the coaches, to then empower them to go make change in their respective area, whether that's EAL or ed tech or learning support. But what the coach can do, what the senior leadership team can't do is, no matter how much we might try, there's always that element of evaluation. And I really feel like we have a good relationship here at the school, where hopefully people don't feel that all the time, but I know, having switched from being a teacher leader into more of a primarily leader role, that changes the relationship. So having a coach allows the senior leaders to have impact in a positive way through someone else, without the evaluation.
I think the non-evaluative nature of the coach is super important, and I can see that in my different roles over time, and how teachers work with you and how you're perceived as you walk in that classroom. So I think advocating for the coaches as an administrator, but then allowing them to step into that classroom unburdened from that evaluation role is super important, and it's great that you support your coaches in that way.
And it should also, I think, sometimes people can go, well, the principal said that we have to have a coach in here. So then the coach goes in and it becomes a checkbox. Have I done what my boss said that I need to do? So having coaches have the autonomy and the drive to get into classrooms I don't need to know who's co-teaching with who. Like, I'd like to know, but if I assume that people are doing their jobs and are passionate about coaching and helping other people, and it's happening, I don't need to micromanage. And I also never want to be like the stick, like, get the coach in your room or else, like, then that also weakens the coach as well, because then the coach is kind of the instrument of the stick, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. So you already mentioned that you are the coach for the coaches at the school. In what other ways do you work with the coaches in the context of YS?
So that's one, is setting up kind of plan meetings for trying to figure out how can we help coaches develop kind of coaching strategies that work for our environment. What works at YS may not work at every other school. And so it could be helping new teachers get used to the culture and giving them permission to push the culture. Some of it is with the strategic plan, and it's really like cheesy, like leader talk to talk strategic plan, but like, we have a strategic plan that's built by the community, and like working with those people who are in teacher leader, coach leader models, influencing that is really important, because I don't know what the current research says on collaboration models. Like, that's the coach's job to really know that. And so for them to be a resource as we develop our vision for where the school goes next is really important. I think likewise, I think cheerleading is a big part of my job, of like just saying, thank you. That was, that person really needed you in there. I saw your influence in there. Knowing when those things are happening is important. It's not too dissimilar from what the coaches do, just on a different level, in a different room.
I want to highlight one thing that you mentioned, and it's completely unrelated to this topic, but it's just something I know about YS, and I think it's such a nice thing to mention. When you were talking about the strategic planning, you mentioned that all stakeholders have had an input into strategic planning, and that it's leader talk. That's okay. But like, I think that is a very special aspect of YS. It doesn't specifically relate to coaching, but would love to hear even the tiniest little bit about how all the different stakeholders had input into that strategic plan. And maybe if you're able to somehow tie it back to coaches, that would be like even more spectacular.
So the strategic plan, like the big statements, were made over a long time with the senior leadership team. Like before I was part of it, they started that conversation. Then the learning outcomes were established, and then we had input from all teachers at the school saying, out of these learning outcomes, which do you think are the most important for us to focus on? So every teacher had input into that in deciding, as we unveil a 3 to 5 year program, what should we focus on first from your opinion? And then what happens is we then have action groups. And so those action groups, so we have a group on personalized learning. That action group actually includes like our tech coaches, because they're going to play a role in getting personalized learning to be a thing 3-5 years. So because they're experts in that field, we would have the same thing with our languages program. We bring in our EAL coaches for that, because again, they know what research exists out there. They know all the models. They talk to people in that field. And so they're part of the action plan committee. And then they also may end up being an action point. So that's kind of the process that's outlying. So it's people are kind of geeked about it. And I never thought that would happen because people feel like they're being empowered. We're saying, this is what we're doing. This is what we want to do. How do you want to help? And coaches are usually pretty good at saying, this is how I'm going to help. This is what I got. So that's where.
That's very cool, and I love the inclusive nature of that process. And I also like that you're tapping into that expertise and saying, as the tech coach or as the language coach, or I'm sure if you had math coaches too, they would be like, right, where are you going to be poised to have the most impact based on your experience and based on your connections and based on what you see day to day. I think that's so cool.
And it's really important that people aren't doing more than what they're already doing. Actually, what it does is it streamlines all the things that we're doing into one thing. And it says, you are now empowered as a language coach or a tech coach or whatever to go do this. Like, we've written it down. We've said this is important. Go make it happen. Like, we really want people to make things happen, because it can't just be the leaders, because we need to sleep and we don't have the full vision of what's going on in every single classroom.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So changing subjects a little bit here, thinking about your relationship with the coaches at your school, whatever discipline they are, what are some of the opportunities that you see for them to really work with you and maybe with your administrative team? How can they kind of coach up as well as coach, I don't want to say down, but sort of coach to the teachers as well?
I think this is something that coaches often need to remember, is that they do need to push up. Middle leaders in general need to remember that they have to push up. They have to advocate for their position or their beliefs in terms of what's going to have impact on student learning. They have to be a voice in the room, but they can't wait for the invitation. Like, send a calendar invite. Like, I don't know any admin that would go, you know what? No, I'm not going to meet with you. Like, send a calendar invite or talk to the secretary, schedule a time. Like, most leaders are pretty excited to talk about learning. And so, but don't wait, because other people are already inviting themselves and my calendar gets full. So it's really, and knowing what's important to your school. Like, you probably won't change, you may not change the big things. You're not going to change an IB school to an AP school, or a American school into a British school or whatever. But if you know what learning looks like in your school, then you know what to advocate for and what your leaders are looking for in those conversations.
I think that's really good advice, and I think it's really important that all coaches, all teachers, but coaches especially, I think they have the opportunity to be in the room for those conversations, and they have the opportunity to, like you said, to call the meeting and to actually open up the room and say, hey, this is something that I am seeing on a regular basis, or this is something that I know that we need, and to really put that leadership step forward is that's part of the job. I think that's a really important part of the job that sometimes does get overlooked or can be intimidating especially for new coaches.
I think you nailed it, Clint. It's intimidating. Like, I work with a lot of new coaches, and that idea of like being the advocate, making the calendar invite, like just getting out there and doing it is so scary to someone who's new in the role. And it's really interesting, Rebekah, that was the very first thing that you said in that response, because I wonder how, even in the interview process, if that comes across, and I'm not talking about YS, obviously, but when coaches are being hired, is that part of the conversation? Because I know so many coaches come to me and they're like, I don't know how to get my leader's ear. And I'm like, well, make an appointment.
And if it's freaking people out, like I get like the idea of often it's the principal or whoever making the agenda, like make the agenda, say, and have it be focused on student learning and have an idea of what it is that you want to do. Structure it as a conversation, I know it can be freaky the first time, but if you have an agenda in mind and and then your principal knows that you're not just wasting your time and it's not just like a gas bag, like it's a real conversation focused around student learning, focused on change, focused on collaboration models, whatever it is that you're focusing on, then that will hopefully give you comfort going into that meeting going, okay, I got a plan. And it may end up that it's a totally different conversation. It goes a different direction. But I find having an agenda for myself and for when I talk to the head of school for kind of big picture things, it just gives me a little bit of comfort and it can give you a little bit of comfort. And it makes you look good that you have an agenda. It seems really simple, but it's important.
Absolutely.
And if you come to me with a plan, I'm going to find ways to say yes most of the time, right? If it's a well thought out plan and I'm like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And if you want to take on that responsibility and you're super excited about it, absolutely. Why am I going to be I'm going to hoard that? I know not every administrator will feel that way or every leader will feel that way, but I think leaders do appreciate when you come and say, I have a plan for how we're going to do this. And they're basically just giving you feedback and improving your plan rather than starting with a blank piece of paper and going, we need to draw this up together.
And a really simple way to make sure your agenda is good is don't use the word discuss in your agenda points. Are you going to evaluate? Are you going to list? Are you going to explore? So then, it's basic IB command terms, but if you just say discuss, then all right, that's going to be I'll geek out about it, but there's no outcome. Okay. Then the next time you send the invite, I'll say, well, why don't we just talk at the lunch table? But again, just being really smart with that. When you have that time, what is it that you actually want to do? It should be action oriented in some way. I think and if it is just, I don't know, I'm confused, then that's a different conversation and a different way of talking to your principal, I think. It's saying, hey, I really want to explore, what do you mean by this? Okay, I'm happy to do that too. But being clear when you walk in what you want to talk about and making sure your principal is clear about what they're going to be talking about.
And I think that goes back to what you were saying too about, empowering coaches. One of your roles is to coach the coaches and to empower the coaches to kind of, they're the boots on the ground, right, in the classrooms. And you as a group are kind of maybe setting that vision together. And that's an opportunity too, to help clarify, make sure that as a coach, I know that we're all on the same page, because then you're going to trust me to go into those classrooms and work with those teachers and know that we're pushing in the right direction.
I literally got an invite yesterday from our IT coach, and the calendar invite says coaching conversation because he wants to get better at it, and he wants to look at what it's going to look like more in the secondary school. And so I know what that meeting is going to be about. We're not talking about platforms, and we're not talking about, which that's a different meeting. One is going to be, what are some different resources that I know about coaching and all of those things. And I'm equally geeked about that.
It's not to say that you don't want to hire new coaches, but everything that we just talked about is such an advertisement for hiring experienced coaches and making sure when you're hiring coaches that there are so many specific elements of this role that you will get so much more value out of someone who has the confidence to say, I want to meet with you. Here are my goals. This is the agenda I set, versus the new coach who's like, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do. Not to say we can't hire those people, because of course we can help them. But I think a lot of times this role is kind of perceived as so nebulous that maybe school leaders don't always look at all of that experience as adding time back to you, essentially.
Mm. But I think it's also dispositions that will help school leaders maybe select people who they think can be successful going forward, or maybe to help teachers, classroom teachers self-select themselves to go, actually, I am very action-oriented, and I am tenacious, and I do have a vision, and maybe this is a good role for me, and I have the ability to have that impact out in multiple.
We lost you again.
I think I got it multiple ways.
Yeah, good.
I think the other thing is for coaches to think of themselves as leaders, and like to develop not just coaching strategies, but also leadership strategies. I think that's, even if you're new, like start thinking about what is some basic leadership strategies, because you're going to be leading teachers and you're going to be leading administrators, and being a middle leader is awkward. And so the more strategies you have, the more confident you would be. That's just like teaching, right? The more strategies you have for the classroom, the more confident you are when you walk in. So just developing not just coaching strategies, but also leadership strategies is really important.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to transition to the next question, which is, what do you do when you don't have the opportunity to work with a coach, and thinking about your own role as a leader and your own professional growth when you don't have access to a coach, or you don't have access to a coaching team in your school? What do you do?
So like, we don't have a math coach, for instance. We have quite a small math department. I think it's about 6 teachers. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have one. It just means that's not where the resources are allocated right now. And there we often do rely on team leaders. That's what we call our heads of department, our team leaders. And so then we work with team leaders, not just to develop leadership strategies, but also to develop coaching strategies. I think that's another way where we can use official coaches, is to help train up middle leaders who aren't coaches with coaching strategies. So coaches shouldn't separate themselves from other middle leaders. There's a lot of back and forth and learning that they can do from each other that will better student learning. Like, that's, our time is precious and all of that. But if team leaders can learn from coaches better coaching strategies, and if coaches can learn from middle leaders better middle leader strategies, knowing that they're one step removed from the students in that role, and thinking about, okay, as a team leader or as a coach, how do I know I'm having impact on student learning? That's a really powerful group. So we do rely a lot on our math team leader to help coach. Again, it's trickier because you're usually co-teachers with those people. You're also in a little bit of a position of authority. It doesn't always work great, but that's what we got.
I love that idea of coaches learning from the team leaders, the leadership strategies, and the team leaders learning from the coaches, the coaching strategies. I mean, I think that is like so ideal in a school like YS, any school, but particularly in a school like YS that is small and doesn't have like unlimited resources to throw at all these different positions. Like, what a great way to value both of those roles as professional growth, like, for each other. That's awesome.
And we now, for our team leader meetings, when I first got here ages ago, the team leader meetings were just curricular leaders. Like, it was just like 8 people in a room, maybe 9 in the SLT. Now it's about 18 to 20 people, because we have the learning support coordinator, the EAL coordinator, our tech coach, our counselor. Like, it's grown because it's now seen as a leadership time, not a what textbooks are we ordering, what are our DP scores time. It really is trying to figure out how do we develop as leaders. And that's why we try to have the person perhaps that's in charge of all the coaches, at least in that space.
And is that you?
No, it would be like someone like the learning support, like not all our learning
Got it,
support
got it.
teachers are there. It would be the team leader for the learning support team.
Got it. So it sounds like, I mean, you, from when I was at YS to now, there's really building even more of a coaching culture amongst many different like people in the school community. What would you say are the essential elements for building that culture, building that success of coaching in the school? What do you need?
I mean, we're nowhere near perfect with it. I think I would like to see, and I think this is a longer, bigger vision, is for all of the coaches to have some commonalities between how they coach and how they use time. If we're asking, again, as a mid-sized school, our teachers are teaching 4 or 5 preps, and we're asking them to co-plan, which is often where I see coaches having real powers in the co-planning. Like if we're asking them to co-plan with the learning support and the IT and the EAL, that's a lot of meetings and a lot of input and a lot of talking. So I think for us, that's part of our next step is trying to figure out what that's going to look like. To systemize it isn't quite the right word, but we'll roll with it now. Like to systemize those conversations, so that, because I feel like teachers are becoming more and more open to coaching and co-planning in particular, because of a lot of the hard work that learning support in particular has done to make that happen. People are more open to people coming into their classrooms, but it can be a lot of meetings, and sometimes coaches in their own sphere feel like they're not getting all the time that they want, but then forgetting that there's 4 other coaches who are trying to get to that one teacher who's really open to coaching.
It sounds like, too, what you're talking about.
Oh, you dropped.
No, I don't hear him. You don't hear him.
No, I hear him. I see him talking. Nope.
I'm just getting no's.
Yeah, go.
Oh, go. Excellent. Listen, you're talking about kind of the scalability of your coaching model, right? And how do you get that efficiency? And how do you make it so that the work that the tech coach is doing is applicable to the EAL coach, is applicable to the math coach? And so that when you sit down in that room together, like stuff gets done. And we do the same thing with our students too, right? We want to have systems in.
China, man.
I know.
Middle of the day. Yeah.
But yeah, scaling the coaching model. I think that's exactly what Rebekah's talking about, because that is exactly the issue. One poor teacher that has 5 other like super excited, passionate people like at the door, like, when can I get in here? That's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Is there anything else, Rebekah, like you were talking in that bit about scaling the coaching model, that teachers are becoming more and more open to co-teaching. What do you think is going on at the school? You mentioned learning support has helped that. What do you think is going on at the school to help make that growth mindset, I don't know, attitude like flourish, where teachers are feeling more willing to have that input into their day-to-day practice?
We've started to talk a lot about how do we make, this is the Hattie thing, and it's very cliche to like quote Hattie, but like a year's worth of progress for a year's worth of time. And that idea that not all kids are doing that, because we as teachers don't have every skill at our disposal. And so as teachers are thinking, how do I help the kid who has ASD, or how do I help my new language learners, or how do I help personalized learning, or how can I use technology as a way to gathering evidence about student learning? I think that's a big one for tech coaches that I want to see more of. It's all of that stuff, and trying to figure out how do we manage it, I guess.
Awesome. So this is all the great things about coaching. What happens when coaching doesn't go so great? Where do coaches, or does coaching as a role in a school fail? And what can we do about it?
I think it can fail when a person doesn't have hustle. And if a person doesn't have really good relationships with people, and doesn't know the kids, I think those are three really important things that I need to see coaches. I need them to have hustle and to just go make those connections and go do their thing and like come back and be like, hey, Rebekah, this totally worked, or this didn't work. What can we do? And just know that that's happening. I need them to know the kids, because if we're going to be talking, if their goal is to make sure that every kid is learning, they need to know the kids. So they can't just sit in their office during downtimes. They have to be coaches, like sports coaches, or they have to be on playground duty. Like, you have to know the kids, because otherwise, as a teacher, I'm like, you don't know them. Who are you to tell me what Kai needs? Like, picking Kai because that's like the Japanese version of John. Teachers don't have time for people who don't know their kids, I think. And I think they also just need to know their stuff, and be flexible with it. Thick skin also can't hurt.
I like the emphasis on knowing the kids. I think it's really easy when you're outside of your own classroom to not build the relationships with the teachers, but you also need to build those relationships with the students. And the more face time that you have with them and the more class time you have with them, obviously the easier that is, but it's so important to have that rapport with your student body.
And trust me, I know how hard it is. Like, it's really easy at the start of the day to get like logged in your emails and like to do all the things that you have to do. It's really easy. So you've got to schedule the time, like put it in your calendar. I'm going to be, greeting kids or whatever it might be, because how are you going to help the kids if you don't know them?
Mm-hmm. It is I can't think of the right word right now, but that supports coaches having at least one class, because even just having one class gets you into like the kids and they know who you are without you. Like, everybody knows who the principal is, but nobody knows who the coach is unless there's some reason for them to get to know you. So I think as hard as that can be for a coach, there is a lot of value to having at least one class, because that just gets reminds you all the things teachers have to do, like reports and duty and talking to parents and grading and all those kinds of things. And it gets you in the culture of what's going on with the kids at the school that you're at.
Because otherwise you're just like a voice on high coming in and like, all right, fine.
You're almost like a school-based consultant rather than a coach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it's cheaper to bring someone in for 2 weeks to be a consultant than hire someone full-time. So, make it work. And ask for help when necessary.
I think that's great advice for all coaches, new or experienced. Sometimes experienced coaches forget that as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point that it's cheaper to bring somebody in for 2 weeks than it is to hire them full time. And I think that is like a take-home message for coaches just in general. Like, what is the added value that you bring by being part of this school community that's more than what someone can just fly in and do? And as the person who's currently doing the flying in and doing, I am like, there are so many things. Please do these things when I am not here. Like, I cannot do these things in 2 weeks. But like we've been talking about this whole conversation, that person has to have the right disposition. They have to have built those relationships. They do have to have the time to be able to do it. And they have to have some sort of knowledge, experience, expertise to be that passionate advocate. So this is one of those roles that is such a like tightrope in so many different ways. And this conversation is really highlighting that for me right now.
Yeah.
So we talked about how coaching fails. What makes a coach invaluable to you? I think you've hit on this a bunch of different times, and maybe you have a couple thoughts about what makes coaches just great.
I want someone that I can go to and say, hey, I don't know what to do about this. What have you got? And to brainstorm ideas. For me, it's invaluable when a coach makes their own connections without me making it happen. As a teacher, I live by this philosophy, and I'm trying to live it as a leader, but ask for forgiveness, not permission. Like, I don't want to micromanage like where your time is being used and where you are. Like use your time wisely, make a change and ask for help when you need it, I think is really important. It's also the people. It really helps when the coaches are excited by learning and excited by it, and aren't afraid to say, I know quite a bit about this and I'm really excited to work with you. People need to be excited to work with the coaches.
I mean, we keep coming back to this dispositions thing because that's like another common thread, I think. And if you are genuinely interested in improving student learning and what are students learning and how can I make that better, more fun, more engaging, whatever the case may be, those questions come from a personal passion, personal interest, personal engagement, as opposed to, here's my book I read about coaching, here are the 7 questions in a coaching conversation. I'm going to ask the first one and then the second one and the third. You know what I mean? It's a totally different dynamic.
And most teachers, unless you're like, you should be super upfront when you're like using like those coaching conventions, but a lot of teachers can kind of see through like those 7 steps. Like, they're like, all right, they're pausing, they're paraphrasing, they're like, all right, cool. Like, which it's a good strategy perhaps to start with, but not over relying on it and having lots of strategies so you're not using that same one.
Yeah. I don't know if you have this moment, but was there ever a time in your career where you were like, what do we need coaches for? They just sit in an office and do whatever. And then to the moment of, oh, I see, the aha moment. This is why coaches are useful, valuable.
It's like asking, like, do I see the value of teachers? Like, like, if the coaches are there, I appreciate. And I'm not going to lie, like, if they're not there, I don't always realize why they need to be there until they are there, if that makes sense. So, like, we don't have a math coach. I'm like, I don't know if we need one. Like, okay. But I don't have it, so I don't miss it. I think for coaches as they leave, because in the international world, if they're moving, it's really important to leave a good legacy so that you're setting things up well for whoever's coming in next, so they have a good road to travel. Yeah, I don't have a very specific example of that.
Sounds like you've been quite lucky though in working in an environment where you maybe not always had explicit coaching support, but certainly a lot of support either from your heads of department in that coaching role or a tech coach or a literacy coach or maybe your administration. And so you've kind of worked in that environment. It's like that whole idea of like, you know, do fish see water? No, they don't, because it's just always there. Like, I think that is becoming more and more prevalent in a lot of schools.
Yeah, and I think that's what coaches have. Again, it's that idea of making yourself invaluable. Like, how are you going to make yourself? Because that's the other thing, is the role is going to continually change. You're going to coach enough people up that they no longer need the type of coaching you were giving them in 2015. They need a totally different type of coaching because you made them better. So what are you going to do now? Like, and I think perhaps that's some of the stress that people have, is that they're trying to coach the way that it was 2-3 years ago, and it's changed, and it's going to change again, because if you've done your job well, that's what you want. You kind of want to work yourself out of a job, but then keep finding a new one.
Nailed it. I feel like that was awesome. Like, I really appreciate all of your time and thoughtful reflection on all of those different experiences. And I'm sure for Clint, it's the same as for me. It's like so amazing to hear this like really detailed and focused update on coaching at YS, because both of us having been coaches at YS, it's really great to see the program continue to grow and develop. So thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
About this stuff.
Yay. Thanks, Rebekah.
No worries.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Welcome. Lovely seeing you guys again.
Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you'll know when we release a new video each week. At Aduro Learning, as you know, we want to help you coach better. To get you started, we've got a free digital download for you called 5 Strategies for Your Coaching Toolkit right in the description box below. And if you're looking for even more, we now offer private coaching sessions to help you work through any specific issue you might be having as a coach or even just as an educator. Do you have a problem you can't seem to solve? Get your introductory private coaching session for free with us. Learn more at adurolearning.com/private coaching. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.